but not usually here. And it was just a strange noise came from your end, but maybe it wasn't your end. Anyway, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning, your talk show for the news that impacts Niagara Falls. It's Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. Okay, so first story we've got is about Hamilton clearing the homeless encampments. We didn't get to this one yesterday.
Oh, well, yeah, I've already forgotten about that. Okay, let's talk about it. That's an old article, isn't it?
Last week.
Last week, yeah, I remember. Okay, I have to go back to it. I haven't read it for
Sunday.
a while.
Sunday.
Sunday?
Yeah, Sunday, yeah.
Basically,
Basically, Hamilton.
I posted
it. You posted it.
Huh.
Yeah, it was on yesterday's list. We didn't get to it. But basically, they're saying it's cleared more than a dozen encampments from private property this week. And in 2023, the city approved an encampment protocol that allowed outdoor shelters as long as they follow specific guidelines, such as distance requirements from some community facilities, and did not have a cluster of more than 5 tents in them. All right, and that protocol was actually rescinded last week, and the council had a vote in January. After a council vote in January, the municipal law enforcement officers and Hamilton Police have now begun enforcing the bylaw that prohibits camping in city parks.
Well, I don't know where I put it.
And this is in reality, this is the first of many that we're going to be hearing about, because Doug Ford hasn't yet put into place. He said in December he planned to pass a law requiring encampments in public spaces to be cleared and introduce stronger trespass laws and fines. But that's not yet been introduced, but Hamilton's following suit, even though it's not been introduced. We've been expecting this anyway, Dave, right? Hey, Dave. You know, we've been expecting this for quite a while, haven't we? What's going on? You're frozen. Dave seems to be frozen there. Okay. There you are, Dave. I said we've been
you kind of disappeared for a while.
I said we've been expecting this for quite a while.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know what I did to the article, but I don't have it, so I had to bring up another one here.
Yeah.
So basically, it's either that or go with the notwithstanding clause kind of thing. I'm sure everybody's trying to find solutions that don't have to go that desperate, but
yeah,
I don't know what they're going to do. There are encampments, right? Well, we know the one right there in Victoria, right close to Bridge Street. There's one there. What are you going to do?
Well, that's not on a city park, though.
No, it isn't.
Right. I think that ones on city parks are probably it's not desirable, because city parks are supposed to be used by everybody, right? And homeless can sit there during the day, but I think encampments on the city park, I'm not so sure is a wise thing, right? You know what? The strangest place I saw them in put a tent up was, do you know the old courthouse in St. Catharines, right next to the city hall?
Yeah.
All right. They put a tent up right there, right next to, and made it up, snuggle close to the building as they could. It was kind of weird.
Well, they're going to have access to the washrooms during office hours, I guess, or I don't know.
The place is typically closed anyway. I don't think there's anybody goes in and out of there today. It's primarily a closed building.
Oh, okay. Well,
which I actually think is a pity because I'd like to see the building be used.
yeah, for sure.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of, you know, old buildings. I like to keep them because I think they're good. They, you know, part of our history, but they should either be used as a museum or be used as, you know, used as office space, or, you know, because I bet you'll find that St. Catherine City probably don't have enough office space.
Yeah, I don't know what. It's
Anyway,
just
that's
well,
an aside. That's
yeah.
an aside.
I got
Massive
no
aside.
opinion on that right now, but I would, yeah, of course, we'd like, except for the, yeah, we'd like to utilize that space. That's taxpayers' money supporting that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, thoughts about tossing homeless out of parks?
Yep, get rid of them all. In fact, motivate them to move to the United States. We don't need them.
Well, I was going to say in the winter it's warmer in Vegas, isn't it?
Well, that's why they have a whole lot of homeless people down there, evidently, because the weather and the weather's more consistent. You're not going to get big floods, or you're going to have pretty hot days, but um, your weather is consistent and you can maintain yourself in and around Vegas. I think probably just by mooching too, the amount of people coming and going from Vegas, you always find a soft heart here or there to, give you a couple of bucks. But I don't know. It's just a growing problem. We have to find solutions for it. We haven't really found any solutions for it, and this is just going to continue.
Yeah.
We are in Ontario, Canada, one of the most prosperous places on the face of the planet, and we've got homeless people living in a park.
Yeah. And that's the dichotomy. Well, that's the dichotomy of it all, isn't it, Dave? You know, right? We're one of the, you know, wealthiest places on the planet, but yet we also have some of the poorest people on the planet.
And we always thinking of dollars and cents and practical things, but I brought that up a little while ago with regards to drugs, and it was the level of despair and despondency among our population, particularly men, but equally big among women of a certain age. The despondency and despair is growing in our society, and it just feeds on itself.
Yeah.
And you can't get. It's going to be hard to move people out of places where they can just exist, because there are facilities that allow them to exist, where they can get a coat and a hat, and somebody will feed them and they can exist, and that's all they want to do is just exist. And so this kind of mindset is, I don't know, it's as much of the disease as anything. So we think we can fight drugs or homelessness or anything like that just by doing X, Y, and Z practical matters. You can't. You have to dig into the source of the problem, and that's the human mind.
Well,
But I don't think you're going to get a battalion of psychiatrists hitting any kind of homeless encampment anytime soon.
No, and the thing is, I think you need to step back beyond there and say, what's the root cause? What's the root cause? And the root cause seems to come about because we've got some conditions that lead to people, people essentially losing their wherewithal. No longer got jobs. They've no longer got houses, etc., etc. And it's a fine line between those that have even the lowest level of lowest level of living, and the being homeless.
The verve has gone. The essence of life has sort of faded. So I can live in this encampment, and that's just fine. I'll live. I can wander around, do a snort here and there if I can get it, drain a glass of whiskey if I can get it, but nothing else matters to me now. So just existing. and
Yeah.
you see what happens, right? I do not. I no longer aspire to have a house. I no longer aspire to have a family. I no longer aspire to do anything else but just exist.
Yeah, and for people like you and me, we're already above the average age of people, the death age of homeless people.
Yeah, well, doesn't surprise me, but we can't get to the bottom of any of this. We can't resolve any of this until we resolve the social contagion that's in the mind
Yeah,
of these people. They've been left behind. There is too far to crawl out of, so they're going to exist in place. So you say to them, it says, well, why don't you want to get a job and a house and all this? Well, I'm 40 years old, man. I'm 40 years old. I've never been able to afford a house, or I lost my house when I got divorced. And why do I want to go through all that anymore? I can't be accomplished. I can't get a job. What do you want me to do? Mop floors and think of my success in my life? The idea of despair, despondency, and there is no place for me other than this encampment with other people who have failed in life. That's where I like to live now.
Yeah, but that's I have to say that I think that's a bad bad example. Well, not bad. It was a well painted example from your viewpoint, but from the viewpoint of the person in paint whose picture you painted, it's a bad example of life because, in fact, I've met many people who've got divorced, divorced at 40, who lost their jobs at 40, yet they pick up, they continue on, they do what
You're
they
missing
can.
the point. You're missing the point. Really, you're missing the point. Of
No,
course, those are the logical things that everybody says are logical, and this works. This works. You're logical. You get down, you get back up. Logical, logical, logical. You do not. That kind of logical thinking never does look into the depths of despair.
I know.
It misses the point all the time. That's why it always fails when you go about the mental health people or the people who are in despair, despondency, say, well, just get your bootstraps up here. Here, we'll get you a job at McDonald's. You'll be all right. Here you go. No, it don't work.
Yeah. I know. It's a tough thing anyway. There's no easy answers to it. And Doug Ford said in December that he planned to pass a law requiring encampments in public places to be cleared and introduce stronger trespass laws and fines.
Well, yeah, and here we go for the forever cycle. So you want to protect the people who are living a normal life. They're the ones that are voting for you, and it makes good sense. And you don't want the people who are living a normal life to be encroached upon by people who act badly, defecate here and there and everywhere. So what are you going to do? Marginalize these people even further. So get them out of the society, pushes them off to the end of the edges of society. Pretty soon you're going to have tent towns that resemble the shanty towns of times ago. As long as they're in the shanty town, outside of town, over there, right, then we don't have to look at them or see them.
But as I say, I think what you're going to end up with is an encampment like a 1 acre field or something like that. Encampments with a 1 acre field where they've got bathroom and toilet facilities.
Maybe, but as we've said before, we have to break that cycle.
Yeah,
it evades us. Now we want to get the draconian thing going and remove their rights, do the notwithstanding clause, and force them into rehabilitation or something like that. Well, that costs a lot of money. If they put that same amount of money that they plan to spend on that on the facilities that are already open but underfunded, we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. And that's actually one of the issues that I think we've got. And there's no easy answers on any of this, right?
No, it isn't. It's just a sad state of affairs.
Yeah.
Sad state of affairs. And I can equate it with the same logic I was using about drug abuse yesterday, or the day before, and the day before that. It's despair, despondency, and the incredible appetite we have for drugs. You want to talk? You can argue borders all day long. You can argue cartels and how you're supposed to fight them and everything. But if you have an insatiable market for this, there's going to find a way into that market, one way or another, because the money is vast. The profits are insane, and your appetite keeps growing in your country day by day by day. More and more people are looking for an escape from day-to-day life. You have that is your problem. You get rid of that, and you reduce your cartels and organized crime right away.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Right. Okay. Going from that to what are the safest and most affordable communities in Ontario to own a home? This is all about home ownership. And this has come from Zoocaster, which is a blog about home ownership. And they're basically saying that Ontario's real estate market is known for higher home prices, but safety remains a consideration. Barrie, Belleville, St. Catharines, Niagara, and Toronto are some of the safest places in the province to be a homeowner. Winnipeg is the most dangerous city in the country, and the bot who's got 675 violent crimes per 100,000 people, whereas the bottom four, Guelph in Ontario, Guelph has got 148 per 100,000. Barrie, Quebec, and Sherbrooke have 140. No, sorry. Okay, Barrie has 143 per 100,000. Quebec City as 112 per 100,000, and Sherbrooke is 102 per 100,000.
That's incredibly 102 per 100,000. That's an insanely safe place. Niagara is considered safe, a very safe place, and it's got like a 50% more incidents of violent crime than that does. So I can imagine Sherbrooke is probably like a peace village.
Well, these are the worst. These are Ontario's worst.
They're the worst?
No, the four I just read out were the worst in Ontario: Guelph, Barrie, Quebec City, and Sherbrooke.
You're wrong.
Oh, these are the worst national.
Those are wrong.
Sorry, safest cities. I misread it. Safest cities, yeah. To nationally, right?
Yeah, they're the safest. They're the very safest cities. Whereas, like Winnipeg was very bad because they have 600 violent incidents.
I read it the wrong way around. Sorry.
And okay. Yeah.
Fraser Institute ranks 334 Canadian census metropolitan areas and U.S. metropolitan areas to compile an overall list of the most dangerous and safest areas in North America. And we come out well on that lot.
Yeah, we do pretty good. We're so uptight about we're having gunplay here, knife play, and we get all upset. And no wonder we get upset, because it's a very rare thing here, and we get all turned upside down because of the kind of violence we see once in a while showing up in St. Catharines and Niagara Falls. But if you look at the whole picture, we're a pretty safe place. We could walk down the streets here without being bugged by violent crime most of the time. So that's very good. But it says Winnipeg, it's basically Indigenous street gangs in Winnipeg that are causing the problems. Indigenous street gangs. So you have a situation there where you have a large minority that's being excluded from the normal evolution of society, and so you get a very violent place. And It is a violent place precipitated by mostly indigenous street gangs. We don't want to talk about that, but we have to talk about that. That is the truth of it. You get a minority that has been on the fringes of society for a while, and it just cannot reintroduce itself into society. So indigenous people leave the reservations, come into the city, and they don't know what else to do. So they cause become street gangs and whatever. So root cause is the inside story of indigenous street gangs in Winnipeg. It's a growing problem. So soon as you read that off, I thought, well, I read that earlier too, that Winnipeg was the most violent. So I wanted to find out. I suspected right away that it was indigenous. It had to do with indigenous people, and it did.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's so it's good that we're in actually one of the safest areas and one of the more affordable areas. But even so, that's still relative, and prices have been going up here quite a lot.
Well, it's a safe place to live, and it's a nice place to live. And that's one of the reasons why everything ballooned here. As soon as we mentioned this yesterday, as soon as the people from Hogtown, Brampton, and other places in and around Hogtown discovered Niagara, well, that was it. If they could, they're going to move down here. It's nicer, more room. You know what I mean? All in all, much nicer place, less densely populated.
Well, there was a thing I remember. I remember in my last job, I interviewed a guy who was coming to work for us, and he said, "Okay, so we were in Hamilton, and I said, you're kind of like in Toronto. How are you going to be getting into work?" And he was quite the other side of Toronto from Hamilton. He said, "Actually, I've been thinking about moving to Niagara, right? Moving to Grimsby or Beamsville or somewhere like that." He said, "It's been my goal to do that for years. So if I get the job, it's going to be kind of the spur to actually do, to make that move."
Mm-hmm.
Right. I get it. But, some people want to, want to go to a different area.
Well, this particular article highlights the fact that it may not be just price; it could be safety, and it highlighted some of the most safe places in Canada to live. If you want to move into Winnipeg, you really have to choose your neighborhood because there's a fair amount of violence there. But in St. Catharines, even in a humble neighborhood, you probably find yourself in pretty good stead.
Well, there's some people who might disagree with you in St. Catharines. A few people, I think Betty would probably say, "Hey, don't go to this neighborhood." Right?
Well, yeah, you still have to use your wits, but there'd be a lot less areas limited to you. There'd be very few violent areas in St. Catharines you'd have to watch out for as compared to probably Winnipeg. Winnipeg isn't that big of a city and it has that much violence. So, you don't think of a city decided, well, I'll find out how big Winnipeg is.
Yeah, it's not actually. It's smaller, a lot smaller than Toronto.
Yeah.
And Kip Finn is saying it's about bringing Toronto money into Niagara Falls. That's what Jim Diodati has apparently said about this. You got the stats?
It's pretty big. It's bigger than I thought. It's pushing 800,000.
Yeah, but when you consider Toronto's 2.4 million, and you've got Mississauga you've got Mississauga, you've got Oshawa, you've got Burlington, you've got Brampton, you've got Markham, all around that area, making Toronto actually as an area way bigger than the 2.5.
Look, I mentioned this before, that this tariff war that Trump has started against us is a kind of modern day version of the 1812 war. What happened in the 1812 war, right? Canadian militias, British troops burned down Washington, and before that, the American troops burned down Toronto. So I figure we should have that war just so those two things could happen again, and then I'd
be yeah. But the vision I have of Wellington's troops sailing up the Potomac and then and then marching up Pennsylvania Avenue and burning the White House. Well, no, to be correct, they ate lunch at the White House where the president had abandoned before burning it.
Yeah, well, it was his wife that took off. They prepared a sumptuous meal, and the British officers were able to sit at this lavish long table full of presidential food and have a wonderful meal before they burned the damn place down.
Well, the first place I lived in Canada was actually awarded to one of the people who was actually on the crew who burnt the White House down. Right. Interesting piece of history, that one. And that was in Beamsville.
Oh, nice.
I never even knew.
Like I said, like we could have this. Let's just forget about the trade war. Let's have an old-fashioned war, but just limit it. Like do the 1812 thing over again, but just limit it to that chapter where those two cities get burned down, and we'll all be happy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Moving on. So Trump says each week 2,500 brings 2,500 soldier deaths from both sides. The Ukraine war must end now.
I have really mixed feelings about this whole thing, the Ukrainian peace talks, particularly the way Trump has humiliated Zelensky. And I suppose that's his method to try to force people into doing things. He's kind of forced Zelensky's hand. And you can see that Zelensky has had to acquiesce because he's had no choice. He's had to humble himself and said, yes, we will do this. We will look for it. But now Trump has turned his level gaze to Russia to see what they can get there. And Putin is trying to play Trump, or at least that's what the media says. I'm not so sure how true that is. But they say that that Putin is trying to play Trump. But I think Trump really wants the end of this war. I think he really does. He has to justify it. Like the war will go on forever. Let's put it that way. If like the thing they don't want to do is vanquish Russia, which they would have to do. And they don't want to give up Ukraine and the other. So what you have is this constant forever war going on. And Trump is going to bring it to an end. At what cost, though? And as I've said before, I blame NATO. I blame the United States for taking Ukraine and not advising them to be neutral.
Yeah.
They dangled a carrot in front of Georgia and Ukraine.
And it was the wrong thing to do in both those cases.
Sure. What happened to Georgia was crushed.
Yeah.
Did anyone go to help Georgia when it was offered NATO and Russia went in and crushed it? No,
not at all.
No one. We just kind of forgot. Oh, well, we don't even remember what Georgia is anymore.
In fact,
and now they're doing the same thing to Ukraine.
In fact, I'd have to say that when it comes to Georgia, nobody even knew the Georgia thing happened.
They don't even mention it now. They don't even mention it now. The first, nobody even, it's not even brought into that, which astonishes me that NATO was offering to bring in Ukraine and Georgia, which was irksome to Russia. Georgia was very small, so it was easily crushed, taken over by Russia. We completely forgot about it. Oh, well, they're not really worth it too much for us, so we'll just forget it. But they did have obligations to Ukraine, and because Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in 1993. In January 1994, they signed a security promise with the UK, Russia, and the United States. And each one of those countries was supposed to support and back Ukraine if it got invaded. And we kind of half-assed did it. We half-assed did it so the war would go on forever. If we did it like we should have, and all army and everything into the Ukraine, it could have stopped it at a certain point. But now we're stuck in a situation where we have to stop this war. Trump's the guy that's going to stop it. At what cost, I don't know, but it looks like he's the guy that's going to stop it.
The interesting thing is UK and France kind of united on this, and they've urged Putin to prove he wants the peace deal. Unusual for UK and France to be united on anything.
Well, this is this is in lieu of the security guarantees the United States is not going to provide. The security guarantees, which Zelensky thought were just thought that was going to absolutely be a no-brainer. Yeah, U.S. is going to. You want us to stop this war? You want us to give up land, and you want this mineral deal? So it's a kind of no-brainer that you would offer us security guarantees, but no. So there is no security guarantees, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of bargain that will commit the Russia from not continuing the war at later period. That's where the UK and France is coming in. Show us that you really mean what you say you are.
Yeah. Oh, and as I said, it's unusual for them to be so united on this. And for the last few weeks, France and UK have been really hammering at Russia to try and get a deal done.
Yeah, they probably got the Brits to help them out here by offering them good wine and good food.
The French, you mean?
Yeah, the French have offered the English, look, you come on to our side. Come to us, Englishman, and we'll give you good wine and food. Baguette, here, have a baguette. Oh man, I'm going.
So,
all right.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said the bulk of the conversation has been about what a negotiation process would look like, and not specific conditions. So they're talking about the process, not the conditions still. So we best remember that.
Yeah, still, how is the negotiations going to look like? What are the rules are we going to follow when we get to the table? They haven't even got to that point yet. However, they feel they have, kind of in the background, certain conditions. The Russians have some pretty strict ones. They think they're in the driver's seat now, but I wouldn't. You know what? Although I haven't a whole lot of confidence in Trump, I do have some confidence in some of his people to be able to come up with a deal that would be.
I think Mark Rubio has been working on this for quite some time.
Yeah, Rubio. There's some Rubio seems to be okay. There's lots of speculation in the press. Of course, I can't really tell you. But Rubio is thought to be probably one of the most competent individuals, competent and morally grounded individuals in the Trump administration. And in the early part of his job was just to send messages, just be the message boy. He seems to be asserting some of his own take on things, and we'll see if there's a conflict going to happen between Trump and Rubio, whether Rubio is going to be just sent to be the message boy, or is he going to be the guy that actually runs his department? And of course, there's a lot of speculation when the night of the long knives are going to come, when Elon is sidelined and guys like Rubio are kind of set to pasture. Because they have mind of their own. it's going to be pretty difficult. As much as you might not like Elon Musk, he has a mind of his own. That's going to be a challenge for Trump, and Rubio himself has a mind of his own, and according to some pundits, has a moral character. I don't know if he really does or not, but he may not be able to handle working for Trump and being his messenger boy rather than being a player unto himself.
Mm.
So we'll see if the night of the long knives is coming within the next few months. I don't know.
Well, typical with, it was weird because actually Trump hardly changed his administration on his first presidency until about the last 100 days.
Yeah.
Then everything changed.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. Evidently, the big guess was on that he had 6 months of doing what he wanted to do before he'd get enough backlash, and he seems to be taking advantage of that clearly. But man, if he can get an end of this war, I would love it. I thought this war would never end. As much as I dislike Trump and in the way in which he handles things, his methods, if he can get this to end, and if he can end it reasonably fairly for Ukraine, I would have to, reluctantly eat crow here, but I hope that he can get it done. But I hope he can get it done where Ukraine is not vulnerable anymore, and they do give him. And I hope that Europe steps up and guarantees some sign of security for Ukraine. Basically, what's happened is Ukraine had a choice to join NATO and become part of the EU. The Russians did not, of course, want them to be part of NATO, and they didn't want them to join EU. They wanted them in their sphere, their economic sphere, because that was important to the economy of Russia, particularly gas and oil lines that go through Ukraine and things of that kind. So it was essential. Not only that, it's very flat and easy access to Russia through there militarily. So Russia wanted their neutrality, and they wanted them did not want them they wanted to be militarily neutral, and they wanted them to be a part of their economic sphere. Ukraine was the carrot of the EU membership, and NATO was dangled in front of them. They took a bite out of it, and that's what caused the whole thing. If they had just stayed neutral, they would have had their whole country right now.
The whole issue about the European Union is probably a whole different matter entirely. There's been talk in relation to there was at one time talk back in early 90s of the possibility of adding Russia to the European Union.
Russia wanted to be part of NATO.
Yeah.
If Russia was part of NATO, they would never have to be worried about being attacked by NATO.
But that prospect scared a lot of people in the European Union, especially those that foresaw the rise of people like Putin and the oligarchs.
Well, anyway, we've blown it. Basically, the West has blown it. They put Georgia and Ukraine on the chopping block, in my opinion, and a big hunk of Georgia is lost, and a big hunk of 20% of Ukraine is being chopped off and put into the hands of the Russians. And sadly, that is going to be the deal happening now. And I believe Ukraine was set up in this accidentally, as it may be, by the musings of having them become part of NATO, right next door to Russia, in Russia's most vulnerable economic and military place.
Yeah.
I think the West and NATO owe Ukraine a lot. Begin to stop the war, but ensure their security. whatever it is, ensure the security of the Ukraine, of what is ever left of Ukraine, and then start help rebuilding Ukraine. Because now the Ukraine can now be part of the European Economic Union, whereas it couldn't before. Now, when this war comes to an end, the Ukrainians can now deal and join economically with the West without any interference from Russia. But it cost them 20% of their country and tens and hundreds of thousands of their lives. So I think that the NATO countries who dangled a carrot in front of Ukraine got them to bite, and they were the ones that hurt Ukraine by doing that.
Yeah.
And so now I think it's the West is obliged to offer those security guarantees for Ukraine and to pour money into Ukraine and rebuild it and embrace it into the European Union as soon as possible.
Probably
That's
that's probably the path that's going to end up being taken. Although it's probably at least a 10-year road for Ukraine to even get into the European Union because of the preconditions there.
Well, you know what? The European Union owes it to them because they surely didn't.
And I won't dispute that, right? And because what I was about to say was unless they waive those conditions, but you're right. European Union owes it to them.
They owe them, and NATO countries owe them too.
Yeah.
And the United States, who did not really, the UK and the United States did really only kind of half-ass came to the defense of the Ukraine. According to that agreement they signed with Ukraine back in 1994, they should have had their armies there, their armies and navies in that country. But right away they said, we're not going to send troops, just weapons. Well, what did that do? That ensured that the battle was going to be one of attrition, and the biggest country will win a war of attrition against the smaller.
Absolutely, every time, every single time. Yeah. Okay, so this is actually a bit. This next one's a bit of. It's sad, but it's a good news thing. So they've now found remains at the Manitoba landfill that the police have been searching for about 2 years now. So these are victims of a serial killer in 2022. The serial killer apparently said that they were at this Prairie Green landfill north of Winnipeg, and they found Morgan Harris March 7th, and they found Mercedes Myron last week.
I have to apologize to the Indigenous people of Prairie Green or Green Prairie. I have to apologize. When all this comes up, I thought it was a pipe dream to dig up those bodies. Over 10,000 loads of garbage had been dumped on whatever potential areas these Indigenous women were in. The only reason why they knew they might be there is because one of the bodies was put in a dumpster and it was discovered in a dumpster. And then the other ones that went missing, they realized that the same killer had put them in dumpsters, and those dumpsters had already been dumped in the landfill site. I thought it was a pipe dream to find them, to go ahead and find them. And so did the police chief at that time, and the mayor or whatever, and I think even the premier of Manitoba thought it was a pipe dream. But they tried it and they did it, and they did find the bodies, which was remarkable to me. And I have to apologize because I said that was like unrealistic. It was. I said that over and over again. Well, certainly unrealistic to try to find bodies in a landfill site, but they did. So,
and I don't necessarily expect that they're going to find all of them, but it's good that they found, 2 out of the 4 of them.
I think they found 3, didn't they? The other one they found was the one that didn't make it to the landfill site. Yeah,
that's right.
There's one more out.
Yeah, she was in the dumpster already, right? They got it from the dumpster before it was taken away.
Yeah, there's one that was put in, I think about around this time of year, and the other ones were put in May or June or something. But
Yeah.
anyway, they could probably find that. I don't know how they did it. They probably know where the trucks dumped and what level they were at. So that
probably there's a map of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how else you would even know.
I don't know. I don't know. It's horrible. And here's another situation where the indigenous women are so victimized by the weird in our society.
Yeah.
A guy gets a prostitute. Okay, that's one thing, but so hookers turn tricks steady all day, all week long. Just one guy after another. But every once in a while, that's a playground for the mentally unbalanced. And it just takes one guy and he can do a lot of damage, and they seem to be, these women seem to be more and more victims of that weird fringe person who delights in victimizing.
Right. Yeah. And this individual, Jeremy Skibicki, was arrested in 2022.
Yeah, well, I'm glad he's put in a cage now, but there are more out there, and there has to be more oversight. Okay, you're going to get a lot of girls turning tricks because of drugs and poverty and whatever else, and so many of those girls are going to be indigenous girls, and even the ones that aren't turning tricks or just happen to be in the areas where there's bars or restaurants or something. They could be perfectly outside of the sex trade and still become victims. I think it's got to have more and more oversight. You're going to have, I don't know, it's going to take more than police. So where the prostitutes are or whatever, they should have some kind of police force. Like I'm thinking of those angels that they used to have in the United States, where they.
You mean like the guardian angels on the New York subway?
Yeah, to help stop violence. And I think
don't know.
it could be an aspect of the police force or social services or something. Just have people there watching what's going on and allowing the sex trade to happen or whatever happens. Their only purpose there is to make sure that the girls are not walking into some real trouble. I don't know how else to put it.
But how would you do it? Because the prospective perp comes along in a car, takes them away, and assuming they're doing nothing, takes them away, has their way with the woman and brings them back, right?
Place for them to go, basically, I think. A legal brothel of some kind,
that's
a
different matter because it means they're not going out on the street to play their trade.
Yeah.
Right. And that, because what'll happen there is the client will come to the premises, they will choose the girl, they will do whatever they do and walk away, right?
Yeah.
Right. A whole different ball game, that is.
Yeah, so
the most dangerous ones, arguably, those that are on the street. Those that are escorts and go to hotels and that are probably among the safest, but they're probably also the most expensive.
Yeah, it's got to be something we can do, because this is a reoccurring story all of the time.
Yeah,
and the girls are making the money they need to do drugs or to exist by turning tricks. And if that's this is what I mean, like the sex trade should be protected somehow, because if it was protected, the women would be checked for diseases. There'd be some sort of oversight to make sure they're safe. The kind of controls that you find in Europe in their sex trades. What we do now is we just get, like, these girls are becoming victimized, and it just keeps reoccurring. You just keep hearing it over and over, don't you? like every few years.
Yeah.
Another Indigenous woman goes missing.
Yeah, and I have to say that in my time here in Canada, I've heard too much of this stuff. Yeah. There was that killer in BC who was
the pig farmer.
The pig farmer, yeah. Oh, he was basically putting it into the pig's slurry, right?
Oh God.
You know. And you could never find those people. Right? That's the most disgusting one I've ever heard about.
Yeah. Whatever gets into a person's head to make them like that, I just don't get it. How can you think of a human being in such terms, like that you could just kill them and feed them to a pig? Oh yeah. God, that just what makes that kind of a monster?
Yeah. Okay. I think we can. I'm going to switch this around. We can do our last. Kind of one about this. No. Okay. So how did that not get switched around? Right. About this. NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams are finally on their way home from the International Space Station. They've been up there 9 months, apparently.
Yeah, they were supposed to be there for 8 days, evidently, and then come back. But NASA's ship, they weren't confident in it, so they'd bring it back, and they had to leave them up there. Well, they had to leave them up there. They had enough supplies and everything to last for a very long time, and it's a space station, so it's continually inhabited. But they couldn't get them down, so SpaceX has got to come to the rescue. And I think when they are rescued, I think probably Elon Musk will go back up in popularity for briefly anyway, because it's his ships that went up and got them.
Elon Musk may go up in popularity if he goes up on the next rocket.
Yeah, I think his time in the White House is limited. Doge has already been delegated to a advisory kind of a thing for a lot of the.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Oh, you've gone again, Dave. Okay, yeah. So Doge has been left in an advisory capacity, and yeah, it's interesting to see that. Hey, they're bringing them back down with the SpaceX Dragon capsule. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, so SpaceX are bringing them back down on this Dragon capsule, and it will make it a fast and fiery re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere, enduring temperatures up to 1600 degrees centigrade.
Yes, that's going to be quite. Well, it's quite a re-entry. The astronauts are going to be pretty happy. It should be happening. When is it happening? I was trying to find the actual presumed
date.
Yeah, it didn't say that, but I looked for it, but I couldn't find. Oh, they're going to land on such and such a day off the coast of Florida. Blah blah blah. Yeah, I know they're going to land off the coast of Florida. I know all that re-entry stuff and all that, and I know that the first thing they're going to love is getting a good breath of fresh air, which seems to one of the astronauts there has said.
Actually, that's one of the constant complaints about the ISS has been how stale the air is up there.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have the things that is in air here. We have pollen, we have scents, we have all kinds of moisture at different levels. We are animals, and we are used to our own environment, and it feels to be good to be home, I would think.
Yeah,
but I don't know, that would be something nice to see. But so
are these one of the longest people up in space? I don't know. I don't say I know the history at all about longevity in space.
No, I didn't look that up. I just knew that they were there for many times longer than they were supposed to be. And
well, it's quite a difference being on a 2-week trip or a 2-day trip, and then you're stuck up there. Yeah.
well, imagine their families, eh? Oh, mom's going up to the space station. She'll be gone for a week and a half, and she doesn't come back till 9 months later.
Yeah. Carrying a new baby.
Yeah, well, I thought of it. I wasn't gonna say it, but you just had to go there.
I had to go there. Yeah.
You just
I
had to go there.
I just had to. Yeah.
Yeah.
She comes back 8 months later with a new baby.
Yeah, well,
Let's not put any oddities in there, right?
it'd be kind of interesting to see one being delivered in weightless, and a weightless environment.
It'll happen sometime. That's for sure.
Just a baby just gets pushed out and then just floats around.
But can you imagine all the other crap that comes out of the body when the baby is born?
Well, for a while there, the umbilical cord will look like one of those space tethers. You know what I mean? It will look almost like they're doing a spacewalk. But anyway, I think the images of that were probably not too comfortable for our listeners.
Yeah, not to mention all the blood around there.
Yeah.
And or birth fluids. Yeah. I think we can best avoid that lot. Yeah. So okay, they're expected to land 5. They were expected to land at 5 o'clock this morning at off the coast of Florida.
Okay, so they're supposed to already be down then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if we just switch on the TV, we'll find that I try to find coverage before the show began to see if I could find that they had landed yet, and there was nothing available, at least on my phone.
Yeah.
I did put that astronauts land, astronaut status.
Oh, sorry. They undocked at 1 a.m. our time, right, this morning, and they're expected to touch down. I misread this. Expected to touch down 17:57 Eastern Daylight Time. So in
5 in the afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah, 6, just before 6, right? Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Off the coast.
You're on the way. You're on the way.
Yeah.
I
didn't know it took that long.
I'm glad there's 2 stories above me in case it goes off course and lands here. It has to go through 2 stories before it gets to me.
I didn't know it took that long to come back down.
Well, because they don't come down straight, and they have to have they have to time their reentry to a certain point at a certain time, and
well, and the space station is in a fixed position above the Earth, so they obviously have to loop around in order to get back to the re-entry point.
Yeah, so they have to get to the re-entry point, and these things can't be rushed, because if they are, you get turned into a particle of dust, burnt dust.
And there's 1600 degrees Celsius. That's pretty damn hot, right? And you do the wrong angle of re-entry, and you could burn up.
Yeah, you're talking 3,000 degrees there,
Yeah.
So, yeah, you don't want to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
That's where iron melts, right? Something like that. Iron melts at over 2,000.
Which is why you've got these ceramic plates on these space stations.
Yeah, which really makes you feel comfortable. So we got some ceramic plates on the outside, so you're going to be safe. And then you think of a ceramic plate as a dish that you eat off of,
Yeah, I know.
Going to protect.
I know. Yeah, but you see, who would think that you could be saved in space by, but you can have your lunch up in the, you can have your lunch up in space. Just peel the plate off the side of the capsule, but make sure you reattach it before landing.
I guess. Well, I think if Canada had a space program, they might take a bunch of leftover plates and put them together. Because our budget wouldn't be all that high.
Yeah, but we'd have plastic plates.
Well, yeah, and of course our first one would burn up. Oh, yeah. Our first, our first experimental reentry melted. How come? Well, you put the wrong kind of plates. Go down to so the Canadian government would be going to all the thrift stores around Canada, like ceramic plates.
Yeah, we can have a lot of fun about that, can't we?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so it's we can certainly have a lot of fun, and it's always easy to poke fun at your own government. Hey,
yeah.
Hey, Mark Carney, everything's all okay, cool, right? Well, at least for another 3 days, anyway.
When I'm thinking of the Canadian space program, I'm thinking, I mean, how good could it be when the plane that carries your own prime minister has to be fixed every time it goes anywhere? And there's always a delay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the PM flies to India for a conference. So the PM is delayed 5 days while the plane is being fixed. PM flies to Ukraine to talk to Zelensky. PM has to ask Zelensky to borrow a plane so he can get back because this has to be fixed.
And hey,
Prime Minister caught hitchhiking from the airport.
But hey, we have an aeroplane manufacturer here. We've got Bombardier. Surely that won't be an issue. Prime Minister One should be off the rain, off the Bombardier production line tomorrow, shouldn't it?
Bombardier offers an old Beaver aircraft for the Prime Minister.
I think he'd be better in an Avro Lancaster, wouldn't he?
Well, it probably cost the Canadian government too much for that, so they probably got some old -7 or -8 where, are we ready to go? Just a minute, sir. We got to pull the props to get them started. Welcome to Air Canada 101. We will be flying at 3,000 feet today.
But you've got to push.
We'll see a moose.
But we'll be flying up there, but you've got to push the plane down the runway until it starts to build it up enough speed. Then you've got to jump back on.
Yeah. Well, our poor Prime Minister is really getting a workout. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is a non-political discussion. There's a non-political discussion, but it's disgusting that we actually have the plane in a state like that. The official plane in a state like that's disgusting.
Well, that's about 3 different times he's been delayed on his.
Yeah, I know. And you remind me of that, and I think it doesn't. I don't care who the Prime Minister is. You don't treat them like that. You you put the right kind of equipment there so they can go. They need to be wherever they need to be.
I mean, we're pretty sad when it comes to this play. Seriously, like when the first Gulf War happened, we had to quickly get some of our ships ready, and we had a hard time finding parts because nobody made the parts for our ships anymore because they were so old. And they got one ship all built and ready to go, and they had the admiral there, and the ship went off the dry dock into the water. As soon as it went into the water, it listed hard to one side, and they had to pull it back out and fix it. Oh yeah, I mean, seriously, we're way behind.
Yeah. All right, and I think we'll leave it at that point.
Okay, without further ado, I bid you adieu. Thanks everybody for listening, and pray for peace.